Hey, Pin Dude here. Welcome back to My Vintage Pinball. This is Pinball Restoration Update number 4 on Williams Rollergames 1990. In this episode, we're going to get it painted and clear coated and buffed and at least start to put it back together. We also will hopefully be starting to do some board work, but we'll see how long all this takes and see what we can fit in this episode. So stay tuned and let's get started. Alright, so if you caught episode 3, we did all the sanding on the cabinet and did some Bondo work. And when I left that, I had done one layer or one coat of Bondo work, but I had a couple little pinholes here or there that I needed to do. I also decided to do a better skim coat on the front here. I skimmed the whole edge here just to try to get this as smooth as I can. So all the Bondo work is now done, but I do have to sand the front, a couple of the areas that I filled on the sides, and give it one final sand in, probably with 600 grit. So that's what we're going to do now. So let's get sanding. All right, so we're going to start sanding with our little sanding block with 220 grit sandpaper. And then we'll switch to 320 for this is just for the bondoed areas. And then once we get that done, we'll switch to my Durablock with wrapped with 600 grit sandpaper, and we'll do the final sand. And this will be the final sanding we do before we start painting. Alright, we got the cabinet all sanded and cleaned up. So now it is time to start prepping for paint. So first we have to mask off everything we don't want painted, including we don't want to paint the bottom here, so I'm going to mask that all off. And then I'm going to do the painting, the way I always do it is I do it in sections. So I'll just paint one side, or in this case we're going to start with the inside. Just one section at a time. That way you don't get that dust-in overspray from the spray paint on the sides that you already painted, and then you have to wet sand and all kinds of stuff. So we're just going to do it in sections. So we'll start with masking, and for masking I definitely recommend buying the masking tape in bulk packs. You can get it from Lowe's. I just buy I don't know how many there are. I think there's 6. It's just a lot cheaper this way, per roll, a lot cheaper. And then I also buy the rolls of these, I call them craft paper, these masking rolls. These are cheap. They're just a couple bucks. And that's what I mask off the cabinet with. Alright, so I'm just going to start masking the bottom since I already have the cabinet laying on its back. Alright, I just put some craft paper on my pinball cart here so we don't get too much paint on it. And now I'm just going to grab the head and plop it on here. And we're actually going to have to prop that up a little more because I'm going to be painting this edge. So we're going to have to get some scrap wood for that. I decided to, I'm going to spray the inside on its back. I think it'll just work out better that way. While I had it up, I stuck some blue tape on the back of these holes so I don't get any bleed of paint through there. So now we just have to mask off all the sides that we don't want to paint. And we'll be ready to lay some primer on this. I got this all masked off, and give it a quick wipe down. Before I start spraying, I will blow it off with the blowgun. But first, let's talk about the paint, because we have a lot of bare wood going on. So we're going to want to prime first. And what I always try to do is I always try to get the same brand, the same line of primer as my paint. So in this case, we're using, I've been kind of liking this one lately. It's the Rust-Oleum American Accents 2X Ultra Cover. So I have a black primer, and then our top coat is going to be gloss black. So if you read the instructions on the can, you'll want to follow the instructions as close as you can. So for this, they recommend between 50 degrees and 90 degrees Fahrenheit and humidity below 65%. So currently in the garage, it is 71 degrees with 60% humidity. It's actually raining out, but it's not that humid. 60%, it's below the 65% that the manufacturer recommends. So we'll roll with that. We're right in the range. All right, so as far as drying times, so it says put the primer on and do 2 or more coats within a few minutes apart between coats. After we put the primer on, it says top coat within 1 hour or 48 hours. That means an hour after we put the last coat of primer on, we need to top coat it. If we don't top coat it within that hour, we need to wait 48 hours, 2 days, before we top coat it. And this is where people run into trouble, and I've run into trouble too. If you don't follow that and you top coat too soon or too late, if you're after that 1 hour, you will get these crow's feet will just grow out of the, as soon as you put the top coat on, you'll just get these crow's feet, and the top layer of paint is separated from the bottom layer of paint. And I actually had a spot happen on the lower cabinet of this Rollergames I was doing. Obviously, I sprayed, maybe it was too humid, I didn't allow enough dry time. So it's always important with any paint, not just spray paint, automotive paint, whatever paint you're painting, to always follow the directions the best you can. So there's my little helpful tip on that. Let's get going on this. Alright, so I already wiped out the inside of the cabinet. I already blew it off. I'm going to blow it off one last time. I put some cardboard down on the floor so we don't get an excessive amount of paint on my already messed up floor. And I got my primer. I've been shaking it. We're going to continue to shake it. And we just want to do light coats. Light coats are better than a heavy coat. Light coats dry faster. Light coats don't run. And light coats will give us a better end result. Alright, so that's our first coat. Always have a rag with you and wipe the excess off the tip. Otherwise it'll dry up on there and you'll have a really crappy spray pattern the next time you do it. Also, laying it on the back, that worked out really good. I can really get in all the nooks and crannies here. So we'll let that tack up a couple minutes, and then we'll do the second coat. Alright, it's the next day. Did the inside yesterday. Got the cabinet retaped up to be able to do the top and the back. So we got the sides masked off with craft paper, and also the caution label where the caution silk screen is on the back. I got a piece of craft paper there and taped that off. Remember, we previously clear coated that. So once I do the black, once the whole cabinet's done, everything will get a clear coat, that clear coat will blend the silk screened image into the black that I already painted, and it'll look perfect. Believe me, the lower cabinet, I did this process and it worked real good. All right, the other thing I didn't do last night was to wear a mask. So I had black nose hairs and was kind of snorting out black boogers all night. So I do recommend at least a cheap mask like this when doing spray paint. So we will do that today. Alright, so I got the cabinet fully in primer now, including the sides. So how I went about masking off my silkscreen in here, remember I have previously clear coated this to try to protect this silkscreen from all this work that we're doing. I took tracing paper and put it over the image and traced it out. And then I took 2 pieces of poster board and taped them together, put the tracing paper on that, and cut it out with scissors. And I ended up with a set of stencils that I used to mask off this area so that I could spray the primer. To adhere the stencil, I used this product. It's Elmer's Craft Bond. It's a multi-purpose temporary or permanent bond. So I sprayed the back of my stencil with this, and I let it dry for 10 minutes, and that left me with just a tacky finish on the back of my poster board. And then I stuck this to the cabinet, pressed it down, painted my primer, and then very carefully peeled this stencil off, which revealed what I have here. Other than that, all my corners that I bondoed, all the bondo work looks pretty good. This is the once you get primer on the Bondo, you can really see if you didn't sand it properly. And if you didn't, just go back in, sand it down, add a little more Bondo, redo it, and then just re-spray the primer over the Bondo in that section, and it won't be a big deal. So at this point, now that the cabinet's in full primer, I'm going to go probably 2 days before I touch it. We're just going to let it dry for 2 days. And then after that 2 days, we will wet sand some areas of the primer just to smooth out before we do our final gloss coat. But it's looking pretty good in primer. I'm pretty happy with it. So we'll wait 2 days and we'll go on to the next step. So we're getting ready to do the first coat of the gloss black top coat. We're just going to clean up the area. Once we get all cleaned off, we'll make sure the can's all shaken up and we'll get this first coat on. Alright, we got the third and final coat on there, and it looks pretty good. Alright, so we did 3 coats of the black, and it looks pretty good. Alright, so while I'm waiting on the paint primer on the head to cure, I still have some other stuff to work on restoring parts from the head. Previously, the other day, I took all the wiring harnesses and washed them in the dishwasher. I made a video on doing this, and that video was done using this wiring harness, so if you haven't seen that, check it out. I also still have some metal trim to restore. This piece is very rusty. This is the channel that the display panel goes into. I still have the hinges to do. I still have the back metal panel inside the head to clean and polish, and just a couple miscellaneous pieces. Not much. This table is, I've really gotten through most of the parts that were on this table, which are now on this table and are restored. But I still have The one thing I haven't looked at yet is the display panel. So that is what I'm going to do now. I need to take the display panel completely apart so that we can restore all those parts. So I'm going to move this to a third table, and we're going to get this apart so that I can tumble whatever needs to be tumbled and start getting this going. So let's move over here to the third table. And get this apart. All right, let's get this panel apart. All right, I also just have a few more things to pull off of the insert board so that we can get them in the tumbler and cleaned up. All right, so I just have a few plastic parts. I'm gonna soap these. And this, as always, I'm going to use mean green. Get this at Dollar General. I buy the big gallon containers, and then I use that to fill my spray bottles. It's cheaper to buy it this way. So I'm going to pour a little mean green in here, and a little bit of water. And then put the lid on. We'll let that soak for a few days, and in the end I'll run this through the ultrasonic cleaner when I have more parts to do. Alright, so now I'm cleaning up the trim pieces that hold the display. They hold the display board in, and then also hold the translate in. And these are particularly rusty, and I always find it a problem when I have really rusty metal that I can't fit in the tumbler. And of course, this is not going to fit in the tumbler. So I need to get all this rust off. And how we're going to do that is with a wire wheel. All right, so normally I would use my bench grinder here, which has a wire wheel on it. But most of this rust is inside this channel here, and this wire wheel is too thick to get in there. So I have to go with a different method. So what I did is I used a little Black & Decker 4-inch wire wheel that you mount on a drill. And I took my drill and I wrapped it in just a microfiber cloth, and I carefully clamped it in my vise. And as you can see, the channel goes inside. So very important when you're working with a wire wheel, make sure you have gloves and make sure you have safety glasses. These little wires tend to go flying off the wheel, and it hurts like hell when you get one in your face. I would not want to know what would happen if you get one in your eye. So we're going to very dangerously try to get this tight enough in the vise, and then I'm going to turn it on and use the auto lock to lock it on. And then we're going to wire wheel this rust away. And as you can see, it's very pitted inside, but at least all the rust is off there and it looks shiny. And once we prime and paint that, it'll look fine, and you don't really see it anyway. We just want to get it looking best we can. Alright, so now that we did the inside parts that I couldn't do on the bench grinder wire wheel, the outside parts we can now come over here and do those on the outside wire wheel, on the bench grinder wire wheel, where it'll be possibly a little safer. Alright, so we got them all wire wheeled up, and now we are going to clean them up with some Scotch-Brite pads, and I'm using the red, which is the coarse, and then I'll finish with the gray, which is the ultra fine, and then we'll be ready to prime. All right, we got them all cleaned up with the Scotch-Brite pads. Now I'm going to blow them off, wipe them down with naphtha, and get ready to prime them. All right, so I'm all set up. I laid out some cardboard on the floor to get these primed. I have them sitting on, I typically just use these plastic bathroom cups. They're just a plastic little solo cup. And we're going to be priming it with the same stuff I've been using, which is the Rust-Oleum 2X Ultra Cover Flat Black Primer. So I also painted the, these are the hinges for the back box to the cabinet. I have no idea what these were originally finished. The inside of them was just bare metal where it rides along the side rail. But somebody poorly repainted these on my cabinet. They had all runs in it. So I don't know what they were. So what I ended up doing is I just replicated the coin door. I used the semi-flat black paint, and then I splattered it with the gloss paint just like I did the coin door, so this matches the coin door, and I really like the way it came out. Alright, we got the head all painted with the gloss black, and it's been sitting for about a week and a half while I've been doing other stuff, and it looks pretty good. So the next step is going to be to do a quick wet sand of the cabinet, mainly just to get any high spots, any of that dry overspray that you typically get from spray paint. And most importantly, I did the same process I did when I primed. I used the poster board stencil with the light tack spray adhesive. So there's a slight edge where the black ends, so we just want to smooth that out a little bit. But other than that, came out pretty nice. This side looks good as well. And then in the back we have the same thing that we need to particularly wet sand. We have a little bit of an edge where I taped off the caution label. So we want to wet sand that down, and then any other small imperfections we want to get wet sanded smooth before we apply the clear coat. And the color difference here is not really a color difference, it's just a sheen difference, and that will go away once we lay the clear over all this. The black in here will match the black here, and it'll all look nice and even. So let's get going on the wet sanding. Alright, so I'm going to start on the back. That way if I screw anything up, at least it's on the back. And I have my sanding block with 1500 wet dry sandpaper. And I have a spray bottle with water with a little bit of just regular liquid dish soap in it. That gives a little bit of lubrication to the sanding, and it just makes it go a little better. So I spray a little water on the sandpaper. And then we're going to lightly sand this. And what this is going to do, it's going to do two things. One, it's going to get rid of the lip that we have here so that when we spray the clear, it'll be nice and even. And you can see there's I got some striping from the spray paint. Typical of spray paint, the spray pattern is not very wide. It's hard to get perfect overlap. So the wet sanding will get rid of all that. None of that will matter once we clear anyway. And after we clear coat, we can buff out those the striping. So, but mainly we want to get rid of this lip and just smooth out the finish a little bit. Now we have to be careful. The back of this particle board, there are some high spots in it that, you know, kind of even came back since sanding. A lot of that could have been from priming. The spots came up. So it is very possible that we may sand through the paint in a couple areas, but that's not a big deal. That's easy to fix, and I'll show you how to fix little blemishes like that after we get the wet sanding done. So I'm just going to keep it. Obviously, I don't want to get the cabinet too wet, but we want to keep the paper wet so it doesn't clump up, and so that we get a nice smooth finish on this. So for now, I'm going to focus on getting rid of the lip from taping off here, and it doesn't take much. Like it's, you know, just that little bit that I just did, it's pretty much gone. And after the wet sanding, we're left with a really smooth finish. The lip from the taping off of the caution label is gone. The edges feel good and everything feels real good. And it also got rid of a lot of that striping. So now I'll go ahead and do this on the other sides of the head, and I'll show you what it looks like when I get done. Alright, so I got all the wet sanding done, and what I'm doing now is I'm just using a magic eraser and some Windex, and I'm just going over the graphic here to get off any black residue that I might have gotten on here from spray painting or from the wet sanding, because this is the last time that we're going to get to do this before we clear coat this cabinet. So we want to make sure we get, you know, anything that got into the cracks or the whites. Now this is the bad side. This is the side of the cabinet that had a lot of moisture damage, and there's really nothing I could have done unless I sanded down the whole side, gotten rid of all this. So I blew through in a couple spots with the wet sanding that I have to touch up. There's a couple spots that lifted. So we're going to do that now, but first we want to get this all cleaned up, and that looks pretty good. There's no more seam from the stencil. So that's looking good, and we're ready to touch this up now. Alright, so now we have to do some touch-up work. And to do the touch-up, we're going to start with the black, and it's really easy. We're going to use the same spray paint black that we used to paint the black on the cabinet, and we're just going to spray it on a piece of cardboard, and then we're going to use a small paintbrush to do the touch-up. So I spray a puddle of it there, and I tend to like to let it sit a couple minutes just to firm up a little bit so it's not as liquidy. And then I'm going to get 2 paintbrushes, a real small one, and then a slightly bigger one, and we're going to do the touch-up. Alright, so on the black, it's pretty easy. Anywhere where you see wood or some other color that not black and it should be black, we're just going to put some paint on it. And you don't have to be careful too much here. Even if you get a little brush mark, it's all going to go away when we put the clear coat on it. So we're just going to dip our paint brush in the spray paint that we sprayed on the piece of cardboard, and we're going to cover up any area that needs to be covered up with the black. And it's as easy as that. And doing a second coat is a good idea because the spray paint in this form is pretty thin. So we're going to go around the whole cabinet and touch up all the black. And then we're going to do a little bit of touch up on the color. I don't want to do too much on the color, even though the graphic's not perfect. Usually, unless you're really good, and I'm not, the touch-ups I actually feel sometimes look worse than having slight patina. But let's get this black done. It won't take long. Alright, so we got all the black touch-up done. Came out really good. Cabinet's looking really sharp. There was also, between the letters, there was a lot of wood showing, so we got that all touched up. And then the other side here, which is what I call the bad side, the slightly water damaged side, we got that all touched up. So all the black touch-ups done. Now we're going to do just some minor touch-up, like these bigger chunks that are missing. We are going to get in here with some color matched acrylics and just touch up some of that. But there's very little of that to do. And then once we get that done, we will be ready to clear coat. So next up is spraying the clear coat, and let's get this head back together. Alright, so I got the whole cabinet clear coated, and it's been drying for 5 to 6 days now. And I used the same clear I used on the cabinet. It's the Rust-Oleum 2X Ultra Cover Semi-Gloss Clear. And it gives a real nice duller sheen, more like what the original would have looked like. And as you see, this is obviously the old artwork, and it blended in nice. There's no lip at all, but there is a couple defects. Just like anytime you spray paint, there's some splotchiness and a little streakiness and some dry overspray here or there. So we're going to give this a quick wet sand and then a buff. So we're going to do the wet sanding first, and we'll probably let it dry for a day before we do the buffing. But right now we're going to get started on the wet sanding. Alright, so I'm going to start wet sanding. I'm going to start on the back. I typically will start on the back in case whatever process I'm using isn't working so good. If I screw something up, I can fix it on the back and it's no big deal. If I screw up one of the other sides, that's a little worse. So I got 2000 grit sandpaper. I'm hoping I won't have to go any lighter of a grit than 2000. But you can see there's a lot of splotchiness, and most importantly, it feels very rough. So we want to smooth that out. We also want to smooth out this transition where we taped off the caution label the best we can. And to wet sand, I got a spray bottle that has some warm water and a little bit of just liquid dish soap. So I'm going to spray the liquid dish soap onto the sandpaper, and we're just going to start sanding. So I feel pretty good about that. It's nice and smooth. The rest of the finish will come back up when we buff it out. Most importantly is we got all the high spots off, and it feels pretty good, and we'll clean it up better in the end. Alright, so I'm just going to go over the rest of the surfaces the same way I did that, and then we'll do some final cleanup. And since it's kind of after work on a Thursday, we'll probably wait till tomorrow to do the buffing. Alright, so we got the wet sanding all done. It was really quick. I just went over it until when you start the paper with the water, it feels real rough. I just went until it started to sand really smooth. You know, the idea was just to smooth out that clear coat. And yes, it looks a little dull now, but trust me, on the next step, which is buffing, it's going to look a lot better. So I'm going to do that tomorrow. So when we come back, we will be buffing this, and then we'll finally be done with the head and we can start putting it back together. Alright, so it's the next day, and it is finally the last day that I'm going to be doing cabinet work. Today is the last day of a long process of restoring the lower cabinet and the upper cabinet. So if you can't tell, I'm very excited. I cannot wait to get to the playfield, which to me is a lot more fun than the restoration of the cabinet. But anyway, so today we're going to buff the clear coat on the cabinet that we wet sanded with 2000 grit yesterday. And to do that, I'm going to use my Wen 4-inch buffer. I've had this thing for many years. I love this little buffer. It's great for playfields, and it also works real good on cabinets. And what I do is I buy these little packs of, I don't know what's in here, 10 maybe? Yeah, 10 pack of the 4-inch pads. It also comes with an attachment that you can use on your drill. I don't use that part. It's also got a cotton pad. I buy these on eBay. They're from China. They're really cheap. And I do reuse them. So this is actually a pad that I used on the lower cabinet. I put it in a Ziploc bag and I write on it what chemical I used, in this case Nuvis 2. I also write the date, so I did the cabinet, wow, all the way back on February 7th of 2018. So going to reuse this pad. It's still in good shape, and we're going to be using Nuvis 2. I also have a brand new microfiber cloth. You don't want to use an old microfiber cloth because you don't know what chemical was on it. Even if you washed it, there might be still some silicones or something on it. And also these microfibers tend to get impregnated with little pieces of metal or anything else. And you know, you don't want to scratch what's going to be your final finish on the cabinet. And buy these in big packs. They're cheap, so make sure you use a brand new one. Like I said, we're going to be buffing with Nuvis 2. So let's get going. Alright, so there it is, all buffed up and waxed up. And it looks really good. Is it perfect? No. We didn't do a full sand-in decal job or anything on this. But it looks really good. And it's going to look good mated to the cabinet. And that's what we'll be doing soon. But right now we're ready to put this thing back together. But we'll probably do that in the next video. This video is getting a little bit long. So I think we're going to stop here. Alright, so that'll do it for this video. This is Rollergames 1990 Williams Pinball Restoration Update number 4. I was hoping to get a little more done in this video, but this was way time consuming. Cabinet work just is time consuming. Even though we didn't do a full sand job and decals or anything like that, it's just really time consuming. And the video's, already getting pretty long. So in part 5, which will be coming up next, we will be reassembling the cabinet. Most everything is restored already. There's only a couple pieces I have left to restore. We're going to be doing some Williams System 11 CPU board kind of upgrades. We'll be doing cap kits in the power supply. We'll be doing a bunch of stuff in the next video. So I hope you enjoyed this video and look forward to part 5 coming up soon. In the meanwhile, I have a bunch of other videos coming up, so please stay tuned to the channel. If you haven't subscribed, please hit that subscribe button. Feel free to share the channel. Leave any comments or suggestions you have down below. And that'll do it. This is Pin Dude from My Vintage Pinball. See ya.